Hi, class. Today I'm reviewing Chapter 4, Basic Media Writing, and also a little more information about writing well. Let's start by talking about the killer bees. Now, there are 6 killer bees to success. Be right. Whenever you check your facts, and also make sure that all of your grammar and punctuation and everything is correct. It improves your credibility and makes you seem like a good source to your reader. Be tight. Be brief yet descriptive whenever you're writing. Also be clear. Avoid any kind of specialized language or anything that might make your information unclear to your reader. You also need to be active. And when I say be active, I mean use active voice. This will also help you have tighter sentence structure and make everything a lot smoother for your reader. And also make sure when you write that you're focusing on first on the most recent information, so what's happening now, and then fill in with any background details your reader may need to know. You also want to be smooth, so vary your sentence structure. We're talking short, medium, and long sentences. These could be compound sentences, sentences with prepositional phrases. Just whenever you are writing, make sure that your sentences flow, and you can achieve that flow by varying your sentence structure and also reading everything out loud to see if it has a consistency in your mind and as you say it. You also want to be quick. Make sure you get to the point. And think of this acronym when you're thinking about getting to the point. You want to keep it short and simple, KISS. Now, those killer bees also relate to the 7 C's of credibility. The 7 C's, you start, of course, with being correct, just like you want to be right. So you want to focus on grammar, spelling, punctuation. Also, make sure that you fact check everything and that you check your sources as well. Make sure that they are reliable sources and not just that you are quoting facts from them correctly. You also want to be consistent, follow a style book. And in our class, most of your work will follow the AP style guide. Be clear, use simple words, short sentences, short paragraphs, and this goes right into being concise. So avoid any unnecessary information. Whenever you're writing, make sure you include details that are important to your reader, not details just because you have them. You also want to be coherent, organized, and understandable. So when you're writing, make sure that you have everything laid out in a logical manner. This is where writing outlines before you start writing can be a really great benefit. Also, make sure you're complete, that you're answering your readers' questions, that you don't leave any information they may want to know out, or if you don't have that information and you're unable to find it, address that you recognize it's missing and that you are waiting on a response from someone. And also deliver your information creatively. Think of interesting examples if examples apply, or find an interesting way to relay the information. So maybe you have a really great quote from someone involved in your story. Use that quote. Or if they provide an example, and this also works when you're looking for stories, look for things you think your audience would find interesting. Now, in traditional news writing, we follow what's called the inverted pyramid, and it has a top, middle, and bottom. As you can see, it's laid out in exactly how it sounds, an inverted pyramid. So the biggest part is at the top. That's the lead. The lead includes the most important information. Most of the time, this will be also the most recent information. This is whatever the reader has to know in order to understand the general idea behind a story. So if there were any major changes, like if you're following up on a story, like if there was a fundraiser, you want to say how much money they raise. So think about what's the most important reason, why are you writing this story? And that is going to be your lead. The middle is going to include useful information. So something to back up the points in your lead, or maybe add some additional information and improve the reader's understanding, but it isn't necessarily going to be the most important information. And the bottom traditionally is also extra information. It's stuff that isn't as critical, but maybe is something your reader might want to know. All right, now let's talk about lead writing. Leads are essentially the primary information your audience needs to know. So most of the time, your lead will include a combination of your 5 W's and 1 H. That's your who, what, when, where, why, and how. Whenever you're figuring out what constitutes a lead for your story, you want to answer the question, who did what to whom? Most of the time, your lead will take the form of a noun verb object sentence, and you will add a where or when necessary. Your middle part of your inverted pyramid, of course, or kind of the transition between the lead and the middle, is going to include a how and a why. So in order to hit the bullseye, you want to identify key components of your story and then build on that information. Now let's look at an example. A fire destroyed a house on Smith Street Wednesday night. Fire officials said an electrical problem caused the blaze. No one was home at the time. What are the components in this lead? Well, the core, as you can see in this bullseye, is a fire destroyed a house. Why is this the most important? Well, think about it. You want to know what happened. A fire destroyed a house. Where did that happen? On Smith Street. When did it happen? Wednesday night. Then you follow up. Why? There was an electrical problem. Additional information, no one was home. If someone had been injured, the injury would have been the lead of the story. So it would have been, let's say, 2 people were injured in a house fire on Smith Street Wednesday night. So most of the time, if there's a human element, that is going to be included in your lead. Of course, you want to build on the most recent information as well and include any where's, why's, how's, or other additional information when necessary. Example 2. Lafayette fire officials said they believe Wednesday night's house fire was intentionally set. So this would be an example of a follow-up lead. So a second day lead. We're talking about an incident that obviously already happened and was reported once. Firefighters said wires in the Smith Street residence showed signs of tampering. No suspects have been named. No one was home during the fire. So the core of our story changed from there was a house fire to there may have been an arsonist who set a house fire. So the core of the story has switched from the property damage of the house fire to a person set a, well, they suspect a person set a house fire, because at this point they don't officially know whether or not someone set a fire. And when did it happen? Again, we're talking about Wednesday night, where in Lafayette, because we're saying Lafayette fire officials on Smith Street. Why? Wires showed tampering. Additional information: no suspects have been named. No one was home during the fire. So at this point, the fact that they're considering arson is the lead. However, if they were to name a suspect, they would say they have a suspect in this house fire. Well, they have a person who's suspected of arson and was probably involved in this house fire. Hopefully, they would give you some more information. Now, when you're writing leads, your length is going to vary based on your medium. If we're talking about traditional news writing, most of the time you're going to use an inverted pyramid, 25 to 35 words that could be split between 1 or 2 sentences. Broadcast, 5 to 10 words, and sometimes that is your whole story. So your length really can change depending on your medium. And one way to see if your lead works is the same as with your other writing: read it out loud. And when you read it out loud, check for pacing, see if maybe there are repetitive phrases, redundancies. Are you using the word fire 5 times in a row? Maybe you need to change the way you're describing it. Maybe you need to say blaze. Maybe you need to say, describe it. Just think about it. See if maybe there are a couple of sentences that you can combine, or maybe you noticed there's a comma missing in your compound sentence because you need that comma and, comma or. So check for those kinds of things when you're reading out loud. It'll help you slow down and recognize whether or not these problems exist and help your writing improve. Now, most of the lead writing information discussed here will be aimed at inverted pyramid stories, but it does also apply to press releases, or when we're talking about writing for websites as well. We're looking at our 5 W's and H: the who, what, when, where, why, and how. We're also reviewing our foci. So looking for any fame, oddity, conflict, immediacy, impact, anything else that would catch the eye of your reader. Just like the loud newsies who used to yell when they had something fresh off the press, you're looking at a way to grab a reader's attention with your lead. Types of leads. Now, the first type of lead I want to talk about is the summary lead. Summaries explain what happened and why does it matter. So you're aiming this at your audience and you want to help them understand not only what happened, but also what are the most important components to them. So you're thinking of those 5 W's and H, and you're answering these questions in about 1 to 3 sentences. Now, other types of leads focus a little more on the different foci elements. That would be name recognition leads. We're talking world leaders like a president or a pope, or maybe international, national, or even local celebrities. They can all qualify as fame elements. audience would recognize them by name. And of course, this also means any famous places as well. Like whenever there's a major event happening, you can usually say Festival International, something, something, and everyone knows that you're talking about Festival International in Lafayette, at least if you're writing for a local paper. They understand exactly what you mean. You can also write interesting action leads, oddity, or conflict. So maybe someone did something really weird, like when people go streaking at baseball games, that's really weird. And so that usually made the news when it happened. Or if there's a major conflict happening, which of course could be in sports, or it could be an actual warfare, or if you have pretty much anything that is unusual where either multiple people or groups of people are involved, then you could use it as an interesting action lead. However, when you're writing something that is just an interesting action lead, as in a person without name recognition, then you do not name the people in the lead. You include that in additional information later on in your story. So maybe after your second or third sentence, you'll include a person's name. Or if it does include a famous person, of course, you could include that person by name and also say what they did. Now, event-based leads often are ones where you're explaining how an event impacts your audience. This happens a lot with press releases, either press releases that precede an event or press releases that explain what happened at a past event. So, whenever you're writing about something upcoming, you'll say why an audience member should attend or why they should care. Why is this important to your reader? What will they get out of it if they go to this event? You also, if you're explaining what happened at a past event, often you're talking about voting results, school board decisions, city council meetings. An example would be students at Smithville College will pay $500 more to attend school this year. The board of trustees decided Wednesday. So in this case, we're talking about a board of trustees meeting for Smithville College and how it impacts students because they decided to raise tuition. Second day leads have immediacy. So especially when you're talking about second day leads, but basically with any lead, the most recent development should be highlighted. So in this example, a Lafayette man faces 2 counts of simple arson after fire investigators say he intentionally set fire to his own home, a second home, and a camper. We're explaining what happened after this fire involving multiple locations was put out. So the most recent development then is that this person was arrested and they're facing 2 counts of simple arson. So again, we're highlighting the most important information in this story. Now, these are some things you should not do with your leads. Most of the time, these types of leads do not work well. And they often don't work as well in script writing, like for broadcast, and definitely don't work well in print. When you write a you lead, it it tends to come off as opinionated or presumptuous. And when I say a you lead, it's like you'll love to do whatever this Friday the at the theater. Well, you're presuming that this person wants to go to the theater, and it really just it never works out very well, honestly. It's really gimmicky, and this can be improved by changing your you'd lead to a third person anecdote or example. And in this case, if we were to say, this also works with like imagine leads, like, can you imagine if you lost your home in a hurricane? Well, if you're talking about a hurricane that happened recently or someone who finally recovered after losing their home, then you're much better off actually using a quote from that person. Now, question leads also make assumptions about the reader, and they often sound sleazy. The best thing to do is get to the point instead, review your information and figure out what your point is. So, if you're talking about a house fire or a devastating hurricane or an upcoming fundraiser, just talk about the event. Don't try to make a hypothetical. Now, quotes, if you start with a quote in print, that can often be confusing for your reader, excuse me, and it makes it a little hard to follow what's happening. The best thing to do if you have a direct quote you want at the beginning of an article is to introduce the information briefly and then continue with your direct quote and additional information. And as I mentioned a minute ago, imagine leads are very cliche. We don't need to imagine. This isn't an imaginary situation. Just use your example. So, obviously, if it's a story you're covering for the news, then it has to be something that's real. So, use your real life example. Now, introductory quotes, you leads, and question leads are sometimes used in broadcasting. Again, it's probably better if you avoid using them, but they do appear sometimes in scripts, especially when you're kind of struggling to write about a past fundraiser or maybe an upcoming event. Sometimes it tends to work a little better, but most of the time you want to avoid these types of leads and especially avoid them when you're writing print or web articles. Okay, so we've reviewed different types of leads, the information you need to include in them, which obviously are the major points of your article. So your primary information, you figured it out, it's in your lead. Now you have to ask the question, how can I support my lead? How does this additional information I have about my topic relate to my lead? So your body sentences are going to support your lead. And one thing you want to think when you're writing or creating an outline is avoid emptying your notebook. Keep the important information, but also ask if that information is necessary to understand your story. Maybe you don't need to know that the person you interviewed was wearing a checkered shirt, or maybe it helps to describe his character. It really depends on what kind of story you're writing. So consider details and decide whether or not they're important for your reader to understand what's happening. And sometimes as you build your story, you realize you need to rewrite your lead. Maybe the thing you thought was the lead or the most important information is actually more body information. And you realized that another point makes a much better lead. Maybe it's newer, maybe it's more unusual. So keep that in mind. You aren't stuck with the lead you write at the beginning. However, you should know enough about your topic to more or less get the point and know where you need to focus. Okay, so organizing information. The first way is the inverted pyramid, of course, which we discussed a little earlier. This format is often used in shorter stories. We're generally talking about traditional print news writing and press releases formatted the in the way of traditional print news. So we have our lead with the most important information, the body of crucial information, and a tail of any extra information the reader might want to know, but isn't so important that they would miss out by not reading it. The second organizing format is the hourglass. It's also thought of as a double pyramid. So you're starting with whatever your main idea is, still your lead. Then you follow with important facts related to that lead. And eventually there's a kind of transition in between where you're discussing another key point related to your primary lead, but it's kind of a part B lead. And then you include any additional facts and a conclusion that kind of wraps up the important facts and your transition at the end. So a really solid conclusion. This type of formatting is often used in documentaries or a docuseries. In print, it's usually a newspaper or a magazine feature. So those are usually the ones where it's like the cover of the magazine, the cover article, or it might be in a newspaper, something that actually takes 2 or 3 pages to read. It's usually leading whatever section of the newspaper you're reading. Now, this last format is sort of a hybrid that's developed in the digital age. It's the inverted trapezoid. This is considered a new incarnation of the inverted pyramid. So you still have that informative lead. It contains enough information for the reader to understand what you're writing, what are the key points, and if they stop reading, they still basically know what the article contains, but you still, instead of kind of having less important facts after it, you'll add some more compelling information throughout the article instead of keeping all of it at the very top. So you're starting with the idea what happened and in what context, then why does it matter? And often under these two categories, we're including the subcategories of how does it work? Who did it impact? Why did it happen? Or what's any additional backstory that's relevant to what's happening right now? And then, of course, your conclusion is going to include what's next. Often you'll have another compelling direct quote from someone and maybe a few more subcategories if it's something that has a lot of exposition related to what's coming up. Now, I know that's a lot of information related to organizing and writing, but the most important thing is keep it interesting, keep it simple. Think now, new, and next. So you're keeping that story moving forward and you're maintaining chunks of organized, understandable information for your audience. Your overall structure, whenever you're writing, is you're going to lead with the news. So the now new portions are almost always going to be in your lead. And then you're going to include information about why your readers should care. So your body is continuing that information and developing that relationship between your reader and the information you're giving them. And of course, you're also saying how everything happened because some stories can't be told in one or two sentences. You really need the details to help your audience member understand what's happening. The biggest goal, of course, is to relate compelling and relevant fact based information. Now, in a 24-hour news cycle, not everything is going to be as compelling as a major breakthrough in healthcare or something like that. Sometimes they're going to have important stories that might seem a little boring to kind of an average reader or even to you as the writer, but part of your job is to relate why readers should care and of course what's happening with something now and what's coming up. Now, in conclusion, remember, highlight important information for your audience. That means reviewing your 5 W's and your H. Look at your foci: fame, oddity, conflict, immediacy, impact. Follow your medium's format, whether it's traditional news writing, broadcast, or a press release, or if you're writing for web. And of course, know when to stop writing. So avoid adding those unnecessary details. Make sure any information you include is relevant to your story. Now, for your homework, I'm extending your deadlines to Sunday night. That's AP quiz 1, your chapter 4 quiz, and your chapter 4 writing project. Make sure you review the instructions and the attached example in Moodle. Remember, we're talking current ideas or news. So that means within the last 3 weeks, if you were working in a newsroom, it would mean something that's actually happening today or now. But I understand most of you are not going out to become journalists. So I like to give you a little more leeway. 3 weeks, please. That does not mean go back to 2016 for your supporting evidence. I need supporting evidence from now. Also, this is not an editorial, so no I or we statements. Yes, technically, later on, whenever you interview people, you will be the person interviewing. However, you do not need to say, I interviewed so and so, and he talked about such and such. Like that isn't how to include that information. We're looking at writing in the third person. And also, do not offer your opinion about a topic. You are not the person whose opinion we need. We need you to include either facts to support or to support whatever is happening. So explain what happened to people. And also you need to have if you're going to include an opinion, it needs to come from a source. So make sure you're explaining who said what to whom. Well, not necessarily to whom if they're talking to you, but say that you read information from somewhere, you need to make sure that you include where you found that information. All right, that's it for today. I will see you guys later.